Hello everyone, my name is Emily and this is my MSN Evidence-Based Quality Improvement Educational Project. It focuses on the improvement of blood lead levels in children ages 6 months to 6 years old. Jasper County was deemed an Environmental Protection Agency Superfund site in 1995 due to the mining and smelting of lead products. Lead can be found in water, soil, and paint. Lead is found in water due to lead piping. When those lead pipes break, they can cause lead to seep into the water supply. Lead can also be found in soil. This is due to the smelting and mining. So whenever they were mining and smelting the lead products, it would dissipate into the air and settle in the soil in the people's yards. Lead can also be found in paint chips, and these chips create dust, and the dust tastes sweet, and children like to put it in their mouth and eat it. Children ages 6 months to 6 years old are at an increased risk for ingestion of lead due to their cognitive and developmental levels. They have a hand-to-mouth behavior. They see something, they put their hands in their mouth. They also have poor hand hygiene, especially as they get over towards 6 years old. They like to play outside and they don't wash their hands when they come in. Again, my population of interest is children ages 6 months to 6 years. They're at an increased risk for childhood lead poisoning due to physiological and cognitive levels of development. At the younger end of the spectrum, they have a hand-to-mouth behavior. They're crawling around on the floor and putting things in their mouth. They're pulling up on stuff and putting hands in their mouth. They also have poor hand hygiene. They don't wash their hands on their own. How many 6-year-olds do you guys know that wash their hands without being told to? So they touch dirt outside that's contaminated with lead, and they come inside and they eat dinner and they ingest lead particles. Lead is dangerous. It causes damage to the organ systems, such as the brain and kidneys. It gets the body function, but can also minority populations live in lower income housing, which was built before 1998. These homes have lead-based paint, which again can chip created dust. Screening is necessary to determine blood lead levels. We screen for capillary or venous samples. We prefer venous samples to the health department because if you test high for capillary level, it could just be because the hand called is dirty. We have to repeat with venous. A lot of times you like to get a venous. Many parents in the population of interest do not speak English, so I've chosen to focus on the Afghan population and their parents' first language is Pashto. Focuses on the inability to understand the effects of lead on children. This leads to non-compliance with the lead program. So the health department workers within the lead program have noticed an increase in African immigrants in the area, and they have found out that they're difficult to communicate with since they do not speak 5,000 children in the United States have a blood level greater than 2.5 micrograms per deciliter. In the year 2017, the state of Missouri reported 4.5% of children tested had a blood lead level greater than 5 micrograms per deciliter. And in 2017, they also reported that 1.5% of children had a blood lead level greater than 5 micrograms per deciliter. The Jasper County area was deemed a Superfund site by the EPA. The Hispanic population in Jasper County makes up 8% of the population, and 4.6% of the population in Jasper County is foreign born. So I've noticed that we do have a lot of educational materials in Spanish as well as English, but we do not have a lot of educational materials in any other language. So we're focusing on the foreign born. Research is important, and I found through research that blood lead levels have decreased in children ages 1 to 11 years over the past 40 years. I've noticed that high risk factors for increased blood lead levels are race and ethnicity, poverty, and the age of their houses. It is important to note that no amount of blood lead level is safe, so if there's any amount of lead in the blood, it is unsafe. Children with Through research, I have found that elevated blood lead levels have neurological effects. Elevated blood lead levels can have effects on pregnant women as well. Adverse effects of blood lead levels may be irreversible. Screening of children in high-risk environments is necessary for lead poisoning prevention. That is why Jasper County screens their children, because they are a high-risk environment. The CDC recommends actions based on blood lead level. Currently, an elevated blood lead level is considered 3.5 micrograms per deciliter. The appropriate actions for that are education about common lead sources, checking the childhood's developmental milestones at wellness visits. Diet is discussed with parents, and that focuses on iron and calcium intake, which can help decrease blood lead levels. And then following up testing is conducted. I noticed that there are some gaps in knowledge, skills, and practice in the area. Best practice for childhood blood lead prevention comes from screening through the venous or capillary samples and parental education. Unfortunately, parents that do not speak English as a first language are unable to understand the need for screening and the importance of prevention. Language barriers are big, and they're causing non-compliance with the lead program. The purpose of my activity, my program objectives, and my design is to educate non-English speaking populations, specifically the local Afghan population, about childhood lead poisoning and the importance of prevention strategies such as screening. My course was developed with Jasper County Health Department Childhood Lead Poisoning Team. This team was great to work with. I implemented my activity through providing education to parents. This was through educational handouts in Pashto, their native language. These were translated during a presentation from a trusted community member. We partnered with Raise Community, and their leader translated for us. My evaluation of my activity, we just watched to see if the parents were engaged, if they made eye contact, if they participated and asked questions. And then they showed understanding by following up and letting us test their children post-presentation. This is an example of one of the handouts that I gave out during my presentation. You can see that it's easy to read. It's culturally competent because it talks about some common cultural examples of products that cause lead poisoning in this culture. And then I don't have pictured, but I did do this in Pashto, and I did several other handouts as well. They can be seen in my appendix in my paper. I conducted a windshield survey of the area and noticed that many houses were built before 1980. Again, note that houses built before 1978 have lead-based paint. Public transportation. Most people do not have cars, they have private vehicles, and they often share them. So we conduct home visits with the health department, and this is preferred, especially to do environmental surveys. There are not a lot of sidewalks, so not a lot of people walk or bike to work. They either hitch a ride or they drive. Large presence of Hispanic community in the population, and then a lot of the minority populations live in older homes. In the past, large amounts of mining and smelting of lead contaminated soil with lead particles, which makes this environment a high-risk environment. I also conducted a needs assessment through interviews. I interviewed the health department staff. The first person I interviewed was the local health department administrator. I got lucky because he retired halfway through my time at the health department, so he was a wealth of information. It was nice to get to talk to him. His role was to establish health department programs, supervise activities, serve as a liaison between staff at the health department and other agencies. He was around during the establishment of the lead poisoning prevention program and helped get it started. Like I said, he was a wealth of information. He observed that the CDC continues to lower the blood lead level every year. So the newest requirement is 3.5 micrograms per deciliter, which he told me has really raised their case-by-case basis that they're having to follow. I also interviewed a health department environmentalist. Her role was to assist nurses in collecting samples. She performs environmental assessments. I actually got to conduct one with her. She educates the community about lead poisoning. I also got to do that with her, and she determines sources of lead exposure. She goes in, she does a lot of testing at the house. She shows how to clean and how to prevent a child from ingesting based on her environmental testing results. She felt that the lead program has shifted to focus on case-by-case basis, which she likes because she gets to conduct a lot of assessments. She's concerned about communication with the Afghan population in the area. She's also concerned about her lack of knowledge about the Afghan culture. She states that it makes her nervous when she goes into the home. She's unsure if she should wear shoes, if she's welcome while the husband's not home, if she should make eye contact with the husband or the wife, if she's allowed to talk to children. There are a lot of things that she's concerned about offending their culture. The theoretical framework that I based my work on was Leininger's culture theory. It attempts to provide nursing care that is assistive, supportive, and tailor-made so it fits the culture, it fits the patient. It's culturally competent, and it has a positive effect on patient outcomes. Culturally competent care relies on nurse and patient relationships, so you cannot provide culturally competent care without having a patient with your a relationship with your patient. The goal of this whole theory is to provide holistic care. Transcultural nursing requires assessment of communication, language, gender roles, sexual orientation, ability and disability, occupation, age, socioeconomic status, interprofessional or interpersonal relationships, appearance, dress, use of space, food, and meal preparation. My borrowed educational theory was the humanistic learning theory. It's student-centered, it fosters engagement, it's based on the student's feelings of safety and how the student feels about the knowledge being presented. Self-evaluation is the best way to evaluate with this theory. For environmental factors, we talked about how lead from mining and smelting, lead-based paint, lead comes from batteries, drinking water. We talked about a lot of places that lead can come from, but it can also come from products, paint, pigment, solder, stained glass, crystal glassware, ammunition, ceramic glazes, jewelry, toys, cosmetics. The Afghans actually have an eyeliner that causes them to absorb lead. And then traditional medicines are a big environmental factor. Individual factors, different risks, again, to their size, their size of their nervous system, and their development. Lead easily accumulates in the body, causes toxicity, stored in the bone and the teeth. There is no safe blood level, which we have. Primary prevention strategies focus on altering behavior. Secondary prevention strategies are testing. This is venous or capillary. Tertiary prevention is X-rays, decontamination with laxatives, hospital admission, removing the patient from the environment, and then consult. Priority of my project was placed on parental education in the native language of the parent. Development of written resources that may eventually be translated into any language, but the resources that I used were translated into Pashto. I gave these resources out during educational presentation, and then I would like to eventually make a packet that the health department uses to disseminate during home visits. I have 3 community diagnoses, but my priority was lack of knowledge of childhood lead poisoning through environmental hazards within the local minority populations related to cultural and language barriers, and it should be addressed. This used the 5 sub-roles of the advanced practice health nurse, educator, researcher, clinician, collaborator or consultant, and advocate for change. My objectives were that the parents of the population of interest would be able to identify sources of lead through definition, measured by verbal acknowledgement through listing the resources. Parents of the population of interest will also illustrate their understanding of the importance of lead poisoning by allowing testing of their children and participation in childhood lead program. Parents of the population of interest will implement wet cleaning techniques. Unfortunately, we didn't get to the wet cleaning techniques due to time restraints, and we had to conduct the presentation in a class for an English as a second language class. So we quit that. We kind of X'd it out so that we had time for them to be tested in the class. This project is highly sustainable because the things that I needed were super cheap. I didn't even use a whole bag or a whole thing of copy paper or a whole thing of ink or manila folders. So $15 per box, $170.75, per cartridge, and $40 per 20 pounds of paper, and I didn't even use all of that for this project. So there's no excuse why we are not giving educational materials in the language. The main barrier to my project was the language barrier. It caused noncompliance and difficulty contacting parents. Challenges were oral communication, cultural competence, and time constraints. I created educational resources in Pashto to implement my project. I used the Rays community staff as a translator. The Jasper County Health Department helped me come up with my project and help me drive what the educational content should cover. We also use Access Family Care to help with testing the adults for blood lead levels, but our main focus with the Jasper County Health Department was on the children. The presentation was given through translation, and then we tested knowledge by seeing if parents allowed testing of their children, and 40 parents did allow testing. My project was evaluated through parents' engagement and asking questions throughout the presentation. 40 children were tested following the presentation.
Parents were unable to demonstrate cleaning techniques due to time constraints, but they did receive paperwork and hopefully case by case basis based on the testing follow up. They'll get to learn their cleaning techniques later.